All right. Happy Tuesday to everyone. We want to welcome you guys to the You Thrive Everyday show, here where we show you how thrivers thrive. Today, I have a special guest with us. Okay, I usually don't start off talking about people's products and what they're doing. I don't start like that. But today, I have to just because I feel like everyone is looking for this type of product right now. Okay. We are so far away from nature and our plants. And this woman, okay, her products are 100% natural, 100% plant-based. Okay. Super healthy. You can eat it, lick it. Your kids can get it in their eyes. They're good. No chemicals. All right. So I want to introduce you guys to Miss Allana.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And that was very sweet of you to say that. We're going to be talking about my personal life and things like that today. But thank you so much for big upping Quince Naturel because this is a business started by two women and we have a mission to
Speak
bring.
a little louder for me, Lana.
Sure. And we have a mission to bring, truly natural products to people. And it's been so much fun and a lot of hard work to build it. And we're kind of breaking the rules of not using all the fillers and not using all the preservatives and really, really leaning on the botanicals in a way that you will not find. But so thank you so much for sharing it. And wow.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so like we normally we're going to start off. First of all, tell me where you're born and raised, and then where you're kind of living at now.
Okay, so I was born on Long Island, New York, and I Long Island, New York, and I moved to California when I was 8 years old. Actually, 8 years old, and then I was bi-coastal. So my parents separated when I was fairly young, and so I became bi-coastal, spending my summers back in New York and my school year in California. Um, so I was about 16 years old. So I truly consider myself a bi-coastal child, both in New York and outside of Los Angeles in the Valley, California. And now I am settled in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Whoop, whoop, Scottsdale. Okay, so now explain to me how it is you grew up. I know you just briefly mentioned that your parents got a divorce. So kind of explain to me who raised you, where you were primarily being raised.
So, let's see, I am biracial. My father is African American. My mother is German, Jew, and French. And so I have that biracial aspect in my life. And being that it was the early 70s, it was very different then versus now, or even 10 or 15 years later than when I was born. So my parents did separate. I was raised primarily with my mother, that's how I ended up in California. My father was in New York, but he was originally from South Texas. So the Southern culture played a lot in my upbringing as well as all of it. So a very diverse upbringing, I would say. I lived very much in two very different worlds. I had my Black world and I had my white world. And sometimes mixing of those things was a challenge because neither of those things really understood each other. And for a large part, they didn't want to understand each other. So that's my growing up. And I'm sorry, did I answer your entire question?
Yeah, you did. That's cool. So what do you mean as far as they weren't trying to get to know each other? So was it like this type of ordeal where was any of it like a culture shock? You know what I'm saying? Like you're over here with your mother because she's German, and then it's like this type of environment, and then like here you go to Texas where people are, they like to barbecue and stuff up in Texas, honey, and party, have a good time, and it's kind of like a different ambiance as far as culturally.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very different. But I would say growing up in the 70s, there was a much more stark separation. If I was with my white family, you downplayed anything black. And it wasn't even that they were intentionally racist, but it was just, you didn't do that. I came home once with cornrows in my hair, and these things that had taken hours and hours and hours to make were taken out within 20 minutes because it was too black. If I was with my black family, it was like, shh, you're just real light. Don't tell anybody that you're part white. So it was that level of separation that I experienced. Understanding that when my parents were first coming together, it was the late 60s, and there was some serious separation. And it obviously spilled over to my earlier childhood and so forth.
So, how is your mental state at this point? Like, are you super confused? Are you feeling rejected? Like, what is going on in your mind with this back and forth of this culture, of these cultural differences?
I think as a child, you just are. You don't know any different. So none of it really means anything, right? It's interesting for me. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s
Okay.
that I really was able to reflect on the messages that I had received, because they're rather subtle. And so often people don't think they are putting something negative into the mind of a child or even a young adolescent, because it's not purposefully done, so.
So, were you comfortable everywhere? Like you had your white girlfriends or your black girlfriends. Were you comfortable everywhere? Did you feel like you fit in?
Mm, yes and no. Um, I was very independent, so I didn't really care. I always had a fair amount of friends, so it wasn't like I was necessarily shunned, but I did feel very different in many of the areas that I was raised in, because I was the only person of color so often. Um, and most people accepted you, some didn't. And, you just had to figure out what that meant.
Okay. And so, because you are more fair skinned,
Hmm.
did you experience racism from the black culture because you are so light?
Most definitely.
Hmm.
I was immediately labeled bougie, thinking I was all that. Oh, you high yellow. I mean, I was in the second grade. I had a teacher tell me as I was walking, because the kids would always pick on me because I still had certain African American features, whether it was the shape of my body, my nose, whatever, my hair, whatever it happened to be. And I had one particular teacher, as I was headed to a class, say, "Hey, look, hey, just because you light, you just a nigger like all the rest." So I've definitely dealt with things from a very young age, and that was a black teacher who said that to me. And I was like, what? I didn't really understand why the animosity, but that wouldn't be the first and definitely wasn't the last. I think for people who grow up mixed, so often we receive rejection from both sides. And so we're trying to just be us.
Right.
And it manifests in different ways.
Okay. So, how much time are you now spending with your mother? And then how much time are you spending with your father? Is it like where they tried to really even it out or what?
When I was a child, it was, as I said, it was the school year with my mother. The summers, I would be on the East Coast and I would see my father, but I wouldn't spend the full time with him because of his work schedule and just his life in general. Um, so I was raised more by white people. Um, and I was around black people. I was raised more by white people, but I will say I probably didn't fully get into the quote unquote black culture or whatever until, again, I was in my early 20s, because by that point I was completely living on my own. I had gone to school. Now I got my first apartment and I was completely on my own. And that's when you begin to come into who you really are as a person. And not just for me being what I was going through, but I think for everybody, until you completely live on your own and are responsible for your own existence, you don't understand life as it's you. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so now take me on the voyage. So we're spending most of our time with mom, and we're in the summers with dad, who works a lot. So what's going on in childhood? What's going on?
Um, you know, just living, I guess. Just living. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that happen, and I think a lot of kids grow up feeling like they're on their own to a certain.
Right. And then, growing up, not to interrupt you, but growing up in that time space, a lot of things aren't talked about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things are swept under the rug.
Right.
So, were there occasions that you felt in your childhood where things were swept under the rug?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, my mother's family, I only knew my grandmother, my mother, clearly, my uncle, my grandfather. So, four people. The rest of the people in my mother's family would have nothing to do with me because I was half Black. So, but I was always raised to try and see things from their perspective and understand and this and that. And so I think that was a huge sweeping under the rug, because I my family could not accept or ever. It's only been actually in recent years that my mother can even say that her family was racist. My entire life it's a different time, they were just different, they, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. But it's only been in the last handful of years that my mother has even remotely come close to saying that her family was racist, and that when they stopped talking to her for more than 30 years because of her marrying a Black man, um, that had anything to do with racism.
Right.
So, sweeping under the rug, I guess my whole existence was a swept under the rug, but you become accustomed to it. You understand?
It becomes normalcy. Exactly. So, take me to a place in childhood where things are just like, they're not okay. They are not okay. What is our first experience with this is not okay?
Well, my father was an alcoholic, so I had a lot of this is not okay moments. Um, you know, whether it's trying to wake up a passed out father when you're 3, or missing Peter Pan when he falls down drunk in the middle of a parking lot and people are hurling insults at you, and all you're trying to do at 5 is get your dad up, your father up, you know what I mean? So I've had a lot of things that were not okay. So um that's a hard question to answer. There's a lot of not okays, but so yeah.
Okay, so he was an alcoholic. Okay, so there's different types of alcoholics, okay? Because alcoholism runs in my family, okay? So we have that drunk uncle. We have that drunk uncle who's pretty cool, you know what I'm saying? He loves on everybody. And then you have that other drunk uncle where, he might not be so nice. He's a mean fucker.
My
Or you have that violent drunk, so what stage was he in?
Not violent at all. Not violent at all. He was he was actually really social and all of that. He was wonderful in that regard. He would just drink until he passed out. But he always worked. My father always had multiple jobs. My father always did, you know what I mean? But I cannot blame my mother for not staying with my father, because it's very hard to maintain a relationship in that.
Exactly. So he was kind of like a functional alcoholic, like a lot of men in that time were.
And so, I'm not giving him a complete pass, but he definitely was not that violent or erratic, or, it wasn't like that at all.
So so he has a drinking problem at this time. So who's taking care of you while daddy's like passed out? Like who's watching you? Who's supervising you? Who's kind of raising you while he's going through his thing?
Well, to a large extent, I raised and supervised myself. And I grew up very quickly. I tell people all the time, like, I knew how to cook when I would take a step ladder to the stove because I was too short to reach it. You know what I mean? So you begin to learn how to do that. And, so there's certain things that I definitely did that were all because of my own thing. And I had some very wonderful, like my grandmother was an amazing nurturer, and she was always around, my white grandmother. Um, she gave me that normalcy because after everything that my mother had been through, I was baby number 3. The first 2 were stillborns. And so that put a large stressor on my parents' marriage as well. And I'm sure had their pieces in their divorce as well. So That's a good question. But no, yeah, so I raised myself a lot, but there were times where you can do a whole lot for yourself, and there were times where you really felt helpless or maybe even victimized by people around you. And unfortunately, that would occur more in my father's home because he lived with people and there were other people. I was the youngest, so there was different people, that's why I experienced molestation. That's where I went through some different things. And while people knew what was going on, I think people didn't want to believe it. And that was an issue.
How did they know what was going on? Were you like telling people that you were being taken advantage of?
I know when I was 2, I told a neighbor, and I was supposed to be kept away from this person, and I wasn't. And I know that people had an inkling. But it was one of those things where it wasn't like my grandmother did not no, she had suspicions, but she didn't want to act on taking me away from them completely because she knew that that was my only connection to my father. So she didn't, she was trying to be fair, but also she was also handling things the way things were handled back then. You know what I mean? So I think she was kind of aware. My mother was kind of aware, years after the fact. My father even said to me, he knew, but in his mind, he said, look, you've done so well. The person who was my molester ultimately died of, he got deeper. He ended up becoming an addict and died of AIDS uh, in the 90s. So, he was like, look, you've done so well. That person's whole life was destroyed. But that person also grew up with a lot of abuse and different things. So, abuse and silence begets abuse and silence and hurt people. And I was lucky enough to, I had a particular strength within me to fight against those different things. And part of it is because of myself, part of it may be because of the people around me, you know.
So how long? Okay, so 2 is very young to have an inappropriate experience like that. So how long was this going on?
Until I left New York, which was when I was 8. I think when you have somebody abuse you, it puts mark on you. And so other people could see it. And I experienced this from other people when I would go back to the white community as well. So these were not people in my family, these were people in the neighborhood because I was just this lone girl, maybe riding my big wheel up and down or just doing different things, and sometimes people are friendly and it's not for the best reasons, So I think that that's something that happens very frequently is for people who do these sorts of things, they can see it. And once I left New York, I never experienced that any further. So,
So at 8, but you just said also, with your white side, not with family necessarily. What do you mean, like your big will and people being nice? What do you mean?
community, other older children in the community, and I think it was because one, as I said, I was different. I was in an all white community. So I was this different, curly haired, different girl, and I would just be out playing. And sometimes, people would be like, hey, come play with us, what I mean? And then you'd be in a group with like, there'd be a group of 4 or 5 older boys, you know what I mean? And so, things could easily get out of hand. Just because as a child, you want people who are friendly. You know what I mean? And so if somebody starts out friendly, you might not realize that it's not friendly until it's not friendly. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So this is a lot going on.
I didn't even realize I was going to talk about that. So there you go.
Well, that's a lot going on. And I mean, just from us talking these few minutes, I don't want to say like, you're kind of like, duh, 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 yeah. But I mean, that's, at 8 years old, um, your experiences were more than most people in their 20s had experienced at such an age.
Grew up very quickly. I was
Mhm.
very independent, very young. I understood things. I often felt like I was the parent in my environments more so than my parents. And, I've always had that tag of she's an old soul. And maybe I am, and maybe it was situations that occurred to me that made me age beyond my years. Or maybe it's both. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, it's interesting because we're going back to things. I'm now 47 years old, so I'm thinking back to things 40 years ago and
Right.
35, going on, and I can see, and that's what I think is really interesting. As you become self-reflective, you can see some of the things that contributed to decisions that you made later on. And even when you made them later on, you didn't necessarily see those connections then, but after
Right.
you can see it.
Right. And that be my whole point for asking about where your mental state was and what you were feeling so
Mhm.
that that connection can be made. We
Mhm.
need to understand that when we're in certain situations, our perception sometimes is so narrow that people are just making the best decisions they can in that moment, of these dark instances. Okay, so what's going on? So like, what's going on with you mentally? Like, are you a social creature at this point? Are you kind of at 8? Are you kind of a lone star? How are you?
I always seem to have a lot of friends. You know what I mean? We, we moved a lot. So I was always a new girl, but I always quickly adapted and made friends. And I guess maybe to a certain extent, when I think about that adaptation, I think about a chameleon. And it wasn't that I wasn't who I was, I think, but I did learn how to get along with a lot of people. And I learned how to fit in and figure out what was safe and what was, for the most part. So, um, yeah, I always had a lot of friends. I moved more than most. I was able to communicate with a lot of people. So, and by that point, obviously, I'm in California and we were moving pretty much every year. So I was making new friends and starting that process over, but I always had a ton of friends everywhere I went. And I think, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, cool. No, I'm just asking because in a previous interview with Shar, shout out to Shar, she's very open with her experiences of childhood molestation. And so it kind of made her very closed off, and she was not as social. She was a quiet child who kind of, stuck to herself. So I just want people to get all different kind of perceptions. Okay.
Okay.
So we're a social creature. So what's going on now? Where's the next turning point for us?
Probably the next thing for me would be moving to, yeah, no, I mean, it's probably like my teenage years. You know what I mean? I moved into a very segregated community where there was a lot of blatant racism. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. We had skinheads and
Oh,
not and all sorts of things, but then we had a lot of Mexican. I was still the only one of the very few Black people in that community. I had a lot of friends, but I primarily hung out with, um, I had a large quantity of Mexican friends because of how I look. And there were white people too, but they had to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I went through a period of time where that I drew the attention of skinhead people. So I dealt in very real ways with that. And
what do you mean by that? Like, were you a victim of attack, or what do you mean by that?
yeah, definitely. There were different things. One of my friends, she was actually Cuban, but she was very, very fair skinned with blonde hair. And so she started dating somebody, and then we got into this thing, and she called me the N word, and it blew up. And we ended up having a physical altercation. And because of that, I became the target to have people come after me. So I definitely had some fears, but it's interesting. I feel like spirit just takes care of you because like on one occasion, and I went through a period of time where I was ditching school and drinking and partying and just doing things probably to fit in. And maybe it probably was a form of escape to a certain extent, but there were times where I'd find out, oh, so and so came to the school with a bat for you, or things like that. But I would happen to be gone or whatever. So I think that spirit did intercede and keep me. I mean, I look back
Divine intervention.
at life and I can definitely acknowledge and see where there was divine intervention keeping me, because I definitely, with some of the things that I was a part of, could have been hurt or killed or whatever, because at that time I was around a lot of people and drinking and drugs and things of that nature. I dabbled. I wasn't so much into drugs, but I mean, there were kids getting, there was a lot of stuff going on. So I grew up in a very, as I talk to different people, they're like, what? Like, that's kind of crazy. But it wasn't crazy to me. It was just where we happened to live. While I did not grow up in Black communities, I grew up in communities where there was a lot of drug use, it was a lot of stuff that wasn't good, and there was a violence and there was just different things.
So at this time, we're in high school, we're partying with our friends and everything. Was this quote unquote normal because, you guys are young, you have access to drugs, let's experiment, let's party? Or was this an escapism type of thing? Or was it like both?
I think it was both, because when I think back on it, like I had other friends who had been molested or whatever. I'm sorry. I'm like looking at my hair going, wow, I guess I should have fixed it a little bit. But I had other friends that I knew had molestation in their backgrounds and just different hurt things. And there was, when I look back at it, there were a lot of very dysfunctional things from a lot of people in my environment and people that I grew up with. So I think part of it was mimicking what we saw out of the adults in our life. And my mother, and that being said, my mother was never like, she wasn't that mom at all. But I'm saying other adults in the environment, mimicking to a certain extent what they were doing, a form of escapism, a form of just experimentation because you're young and you just want to try different things. I had a very eclectic upbringing. I was around a lot of different people, um, you know, from really wonderful, amazing kind of experiences where people are like, wow, like I lived for a while in a vegan kind of commune where there were celebrities and different people around, and that was my norm. My first dance, my first dance at 8 years old was Christoph St. James, who he recently passed away, but he had been on, Days of Our Lives, or was Days of Our Lives? Young and the Restless for years, and was in the Bad News Bears, which was a big show that came out in the 70s. That was my first dance and my first crush. So I had stuff like that. And I was in those types of environments. And then I was around environments where, you know, going to bars at very young ages or different things like that. So I had a very different experience depending on where we happened to be.
Wow. So, I mean, you were kind of on the complimentary side, well-rounded.
We put on, this was before USA to Africa, and we had a huge event at my home. And this is when we lived in a mansion in the hills of Burbank, and it was to feed Africa. It was, I can't remember the name of it, but Lonnie Anderson and Burt Reynolds were at the house and different celebrities. So, I definitely have that pendulum swing of different things, we, I've experienced a lot of different things in my growing up. So I have a perspective that is probably more diverse.
It's pretty broad. Okay. So we're in high school. We're having fun. We're partying. We're drinking. So are you studious at this point, or is it just?
I was not, I definitely, my grades dropped off in 11th grade, but I had to bring it back up. I still graduated on time. I still, and I brought it back. I had like a bad year. I did bring it back. I did figure out how to balance. I was very good at balancing what needed to get done for the most part and my other extracurricular activities.
Why were you having a bad year?
Well, not even a bad year, because I just was experimenting. I think I went through a period of time where I wanted to be around my peers a bit more and experience that aspect of life. I had practiced Buddhism from the time I was 12 to 16. And during that time, I was very much into my Buddhist religion and, but meditation.
Who introduced you to that?
Hmm?
Who introduced you to Buddhism?
My stepsister. And so, like at 12 years old, to meditate for 2 hours, 3 hours, and to be very disciplined in that way, that's not always the norm. That's definitely not the norm for most kids. So I had been very much like that. I had that side of me that was always searching for that spirituality, for that grounding. And I'm sure to a certain extent it was because of some of the instability I had growing up. Then when I was like 16 and 16 and a half, whatever it was, I went through a period of time where now I was like curious, like I started like looking at boys and thinking, and then I wanted to party, and then I wanted to figure out what was this world about. And so that's where that came in. It was just sheer curiosity.
Curiosity. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there was all that kind of stuff. So.
Okay, so now we're talking about dating, boys. So what happens after what's going on after high school?
So after high school, I moved for a brief time to Colorado. My mom moved out there, and I moved out briefly. But having been in LA and kind of that being my world, was not enough for me. I was too cool for Colorado at the time, and so I had to get back. So I did get my very first apartment downtown Denver, cool little spot. Went to art school, and then transferred to a different art-based school in Long Beach, California, and finished up. And then I moved up to San Francisco and started living my life. Became a manager at the couture salon of Saks Fifth Avenue and started dealing with very high-end clientele and products, and meeting amazing designers, and just really being immersed in that world. And that was a whole lot of fun. I had actually gone to school for fashion marketing, and I just said, if I'm going to do anything with fashion, I'm going to do the absolute top. So my designers were Gucci and Issey Miyake and Valentino and Yves Saint Laurent. And, I would have trunk shows where hundreds of thousands of dollars of product would be sold in a couple days, and, things of that nature. I dealt with very high-end clientele. And I enjoyed it. And I lived in San Francisco, and I was doing life, and that was a lot of fun. So, yeah.
And then
like I continued my schooling. I did ultimately meet somebody that would become my first husband. And he was older than me by about almost 15 years.
and so what okay, so let's rewind a little bit. So at this point, as a young adult, how much participation is your father, how much is he participating in your life at this point?
By this point, my father had he had gotten sober when I was about 17. About 95-ish, he fell back off the wagon when his mother passed away. When I was one of my summers in the summer of 94 and 95, his mother passed away. Between 94 and 95, 94-ish, I guess it must have been. His mother passed away, and I had gone up to San Francisco and was actually taking care of her as she made that transition. And long story short, my father, she took a quick turn, and he was supposed to come and see her. And he was on the plane. His plane got delayed by 10 hours. He got to the hospital. They had given her morphine for her pain. And he was able to see her, but she was completely out of it. And so he didn't get to have that last interaction with her. The next morning at 6 a.m., the phone rang. They asked for me because I had been the one so involved with caring for her, and they let us know that she had passed, and that kind of sent my father into a downward spiral for a few years. So I'm trying to think exactly when he kind of came back off of that. At some point he did come back off of that, and it was probably somewhere in this time between when I was living in San Francisco, and then I had moved over into Oakland because San Francisco rent was just crazy. And so it was somewhere in this realm, and he had gotten back on track.
Okay, so how old were you when you met your first husband?
25.
Okay.
So, and to be honest with you, he was probably like my first like long term kind of really consistent thing. I mean, I had dated and just then I was having fun. I was just, like it wasn't nothing was that serious per se. And what was interesting is when I had met him, I was dealing with somebody else that I had wanted to be serious with. And that I had kind of put a little ultimatum out. And sometimes when you put ultimatums out, you might not get the answer that you think you're going to get. And so when I didn't, I ended up, this other person was really pursuing me. And so I went with him. I said, okay, well, if this one doesn't want you, then you go with the one that does, I guess. And so, yeah.
So let's really dive into this experience, and I would love for you to talk about this experience as if you are talking to a young woman who might be in a similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So we want to tell the story. We want to tell the story with how we were feeling, what we were thinking, and the lore.
Mm. So, my second husband is my first husband. I'm sorry, my first husband. He came into my life probably at a pretty vulnerable time, because
Why was it vulnerable?
because I was at that place where again I was 25. I was like starting to get to that itch where I was like, how come you don't have like this solid set thing? You know what I mean? Like you don't have a set thing. Like a lot of my friends were starting to get more set things, not necessarily having kids somewhere, but they were a little bit older than me. But you know, and so I was really looking for that more consistent relationship where there could be a level of I can depend on this in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Security and stability. Does that sound right?
see, this is why you're a coach. Anyway, so yeah, so whenever I met him, um, he seemed at first to really be into that because he was so into me. He was always showering me with attention, and it just seemed like wherever I was, there he was. And like he would do things like showing up at my apartment on like a super hot day, and he'd be like, surprise, and he'd like pull out from behind his back 3 or 4 different types of popsicles and 3 or 4 different types of Snapples and be like, which one do you want? I don't know which one you want. So here you pick whichever one and, put the rest in my fridge or whatever. So, I mean, it was like all these sweet little things where it was just like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? And like one time he had been in my apartment for something. I came home and there were roses put out and petals and just all kinds of sweet things, right? So I got very that was very alluring. That was exciting. Like you felt loved. I felt loved. I felt like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? And yeah, it felt good. But I will also say there were things that weren't good and flashes of things that weren't good. Anger that would arise for basically nothing. I was a very social person. I knew a lot of people and so forth. And if he felt that somebody looked at me and he would get mad at me and just stuff. And then he'd be like, oh, I just love you so much. It's just. And so like if I had it to do again, I would tell, or if I was telling somebody, it'd be like, watch those things.
So
Watch.
what was the anger? So, okay, so we're talking about the beginning phases of this anger. So what was it? Was it a lashing out? Was it just super vulgar?
It,
Like what was the anger in the beginning?
it would be like an interrogation or who was that, why were they looking, what were you doing, what did things of that nature. It would be more like just yelling or kind of like, hey, you know what I mean. And there would be these fights, and then I would, and I was like, I'm not doing anything, what do you mean, you know what I mean. And so then he would say, oh, I'm so sorry, it's just I love you so much, and blah blah blah, you know what I mean? And then you would begin to feel like, I'm sorry, let me turn that off. Like, oh, this person really cares that deeply about me that they're getting emotional, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I look back on it now and I realize how misguided those thoughts were. But there, you hear about there were signs. Um, there are things that I began to overlook.
Like,
Inconsistencies of things that didn't make sense. You know, this person was older. Where was his home? Where was his stability? Where was these different things that people should, that somebody, who was, I met him when he was 39, he turned 40 that for, than a few months. Where was that stability that should have been there? And it wasn't. I mean, there's just stuff that I think a lot of times women, and this can be young, but I have seen it with older women, we make excuses. We want to fix. We want to help. We go, oh, but maybe that's not what I'm seeing. It is what you're seeing. And I think that too often we don't listen to that innate intuition. That was the word I was searching for. That intuition. And intuition, to my opinion, is God given. It's that spirit that God's put in you to kind of tell you, don't do something, do something, be aware. And because we think we want something, we oftentimes don't listen to that, because that little intuition is saying no. And we get ourselves caught up in stuff that
and then, what I noticed, not to cut you off, is that we make excuses for our loved ones. You know what I'm saying? I mean, whether we want to, take it back in my personal experiences, there's been situations where inappropriate behavior was going on with an adult and a child, and then when it comes out, and I'm confrontational. So I believe that through confrontation comes resolution. And so I'm the person that is like, yo, we were kids. Like, what were you guys as adults doing? You know what I'm saying? And then here comes this defense for the loved one. You know what I mean? And then so I think like we make these stories up for people because we're defending them because we love them. You know what I'm saying? And it's not truth.
I think that that's the problem, and that speaks to the illness that's generational. Because why are you defending that behavior? That behavior is unacceptable, period. Regardless of whether you're talking about molestation, you're talking about people losing their tempers, people making people feel unsafe, whatever it happens to be, we all know that in the right circumstances, we would all condemn that. So it has to be condemned across the board, regardless of who does it.
Exactly. Okay. So where did we start? Because your intuition is speaking to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like some shit is not adding up here. Okay. So at what point does it become like, what the fuck is going on? Like, did this just happen?
Yeah. I would say it was, yeah, there was a lot of stuff leading up to the first, like, what the fuck, moment. But I think probably for me, the complete, and there were a lot of little things. The complete what the was coming home to an enraged person with a hammer, and having things smashed and holes in walls and computers.
So how did we get there? We got from Mr. playing Mr. Detective, you know what I'm saying? And he's got you in his what do they call those little rooms? And he's interrogating you, to now we got hammers and we're busting up some shit.
It's subtle, and it grows, and you make the first excuse for poor behavior, and then it begets the second excuse, the fifth excuse, the 27th excuse, whatever, and it just slowly escalates. And it's very easy to not see it coming, because part of it is you don't want to see it coming, and part of it is because when you make an excuse for the first abuse, the second abuse doesn't seem so bad. You know what I mean? Because you've already experienced the first thing. Then the fifth thing doesn't seem so bad because you already experienced the fourth thing. And it keeps going like that. And then, your self-esteem gets in because you realize that you shouldn't be putting up with it. So why are you? That puts a sense of insecurity in you, because then you're like, how do I share this with people? Or then are you crazy? You know what I mean? Whatever. So yeah, it escalates pretty quickly.
So
And
you come home, he has a freaking hammer and he's busting up shit. What happens then?
um, as silly as it may seem, he went to jail, and I, he came back afterwards because by that point he had been living with me. So legally he had a right to come back to the house.
And so I'm sorry to interrupt. Were you guys married at this point?
No, he was a boyfriend, and he had begun kind of living with me. He still had his own apartment, but when somebody, and there's laws on this, and women have to be smart, when somebody brings their things and begins to live in your home for any period of time, whether it's several weeks or whatever, that becomes their legal residence. They have right to come back there unless there is an active restraining order. And I had wavered in getting that. He came, and of course, when he came, there was roses and this and that. I'm sorry, I don't know what, blah, 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 whatever it was. And
So at this point, was it physical abuse or he was just destructive? His behavior was destructive.
it was physical by that point.
Okay.
And he came back, and I ended up getting pregnant with my son, and that was a whole issue because it was basically he forced himself, and my son was born. My son, I knew immediately I was pregnant, and that said a whole thing, and I was still in a level of denial because at that point, then I said, I don't want to be an unwed mother. I want my child to be born with a father. And that became what I felt I needed to do so that I could bring a healthy child into the world that had stability. And maybe I didn't see it like this then, but maybe it was because my parents separated. I didn't want to have a kid but that was like really dumb, because somebody who is abusive is not changing. Somebody who is jealous, like I later on, years later, found out, like I was talking with a counselor, and one of the most difficult things for any counselor to work with, and it almost never goes away, is jealousy. A jealous person will be jealous forever unless they do intense therapy, and that clearly wasn't happening in my case. So I married him because I was pregnant, and I just felt like I didn't want to have that. And a lot of it was my own ego. I mean, seriously, if I'm being 100% real, I said to myself, I am not a woman who has a baby and nobody wants to be with her. No, that's not happening. And I'm not being an unwed mother. That's for other people to do. And I didn't even judge other people badly, but for me, no. And so I made that bed and I laid in it for a while. And when it got bad enough, I left.
So you guys got married. So you had a little one and then you guys got married. So as a woman, because a lot of women are going through this in relationships, especially once you bring a child into the scenario, where were you mentally after giving birth? Was there any postpartum? Were you feeling some kind of way?
I don't know. I was just tired, and you don't have time.
Were you on like zombie status at that point?
No, because you can't be a zombie when you have to take care of yourself.
I mean, emotionally, where you're just like numb. You're just like going through the motions.
Right. Yeah, I was going through the motions. I was doing what I needed to do. Within weeks of my son being born, and I was kicking him out of the house, and it was just back and forth. There was just a lot of chaos. There was a lot of chaos, there was other women, there was this, there, it was just chaos and it was stupidity. And it's one of those things where I just finally got to a place where I said enough is
And
enough.
what was that point? What got you there?
It was kind of twofold. We got in a big fight and I left. And that was a day after my son's birthday. And I left. I stayed away from like September 10th until the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And I sleeping on people's couches, just doing different things with me and my son and my car. I had $300, my son, 2 bags, and a car. And so sometimes, in the car a lot, just whatever. And I came back. So I left and I had every intention to leave. I just knew I had to do something different.
And so were you at this point scared to leave? I mean, that's hard. You only have $300 to your name. You have no place to go. I mean, where were you mentally?
I was tired, but I also knew that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. I knew that I was tired. I couldn't, I didn't, it was like, you're not safe there. You may not be safe here, but you're not safe there. So you leave, you know what I mean? And I knew that I didn't want my son to grow up in that environment. And it had just gotten really, really mentally and emotionally and physically taxing to be there in every way. I mean, this call could be 17 hours if I was to tell you all the things. But so I came back 2 days before Thanksgiving just because I really at that point had no place to go and I knew I needed a place for my son to lay his head. So I said, hey, can I just come? I won't stay. I'll leave just until I can find something. I made it until Thanksgiving evening. We had celebrated Thanksgiving separately. Thanksgiving evening, back to my house, and that's my mother. She will call again because that's the kind of mom she is. Anyway, she had hold on one second. Sorry about that. So that night there was another big blow up that involved police and just different things. And I left again for the final time. The only reason why I had been back is, as I said, I had absolutely no place to go. And that final time I left was really it. No more. I was able to stay with somebody who actually gave me a consistent place to stay, a female coworker of mine. And we were in a 400 or so square foot apartment, little studio with me, my son, and her. And she just took pity on us. So I was able to stop and start over again. I went through the court process. Through going through the court process, that judge did grant me the right to leave the state with my son, which, if anybody's ever gone through proceedings, that doesn't happen typically unless there's a real big reason. And he did see a reason for me to be able to leave, so I left. And I will remember this. Judge Fox was his name. I'll remember his name for the rest of my life because he held my life in his hands. And I was able to leave and I was able to start my life over again.
Okay, just to backtrack a little bit, because you told me something on a call just between us that I think it's really important to bring up because, it was one of those type of situations where you really watch this shit on movies. You know what I mean? For some of us, we really don't think that people are just going through these type of situations, but it was kind of like a stalker situation going on with you guys, wasn't it?
Yes.
Can you just touch on that briefly for me?
A little bit before my son turned 3, which is when I left the first time, we were in our apartment, and we had this great apartment a block and a half away from the water and the bay, and just and he began to relay how he had seen me before we had ever met. And it was this random thing when I was working at Saks Fifth Avenue in San Francisco. I remember this thing being set up, and they were giving away free soups, and so they were really good soups, girl. And so, and they were like little that you pour hot water in them, and so I went through the line and I got one, and then they were there for like a week, because in San Francisco, especially in that level where the cable cars came, and it's oh God, what's the name of the park right there? I can't even think right now. But that level, that area in San Francisco was high traffic. So they set up for an entire week. And so the next day I went to go get another suit, and then I waited through the line and I went again. And this man said to me, listen, you can't keep coming through this line for free soup. So if you come again, I'm going to not give it to you. So I'm going to give it to you now, but don't keep coming through here. That was him. I did not realize it, because it was one of those interactions that I didn't really think about. Well, flash forward 3 years almost, or you know, how my son was almost 3 years old, and so we had been together. He relays that exact interaction to me, and it was the first time that he had ever told me that. And then I'd come to find out, and he was telling me, you know, he moved within 2 blocks of my home in Oakland after seeing me, and he ended up at my gym where we did physically meet, because he would go to that gym, and that's why he joined that gym. And all those things that he did, like when he would show up at my apartment and know, like with the Snapples and the popsicles, were because he was watching me and he knew when I came home. And there was a store not far from my apartment, you know what I mean? So that was all premeditated. And that really put a scare through me when he told me that, because it was crazy before, but then it was like a level of insanity that it was really crazy then. And so that's when I put the real fear that said, you got to get away from this person. And I had begun telling people his social security number, and just saying, like, if I disappear or if something happens to me or whatever, please make sure that my son's taken care of, and make sure that you know it's him, you know. So yeah, you know, things go on behind closed doors that people don't know. And a lot of people looked at us and saw us as like the perfect couple, although a lot of people did know that there was stuff going on behind closed doors, because I'd also shared this with you. We had been very active in a church that was very anti-divorce and very dogmatic in their teachings. And a lot of people in that inner circle knew what was happening, and I was instructed to pray for it to get better, and to know that God would answer it and keep me protected if I prayed. And prayer did not work. Prayer had me staying in an abusive marriage for longer than I should have, you know what I mean? And finally, I just realized that this wasn't going to be something that was going to happen or be resolved through my passive prayers. It was going to have to be my prayers along with my action that was going to change my situation.
Whew. Thank you so much for that. Oh, girl, I'm feeling some kind of way. Thank you so much for that. I'm feeling some kind of way because as I brought up Shar's interview, this is a repeat pattern too with prior interviews that I've done, including this one, where the community is lacking. You know what I mean? And like your church community, you're in a situation where you are being harmed. So it's like the men in this organization because I kind of grew up in Christian ministry. And so I understand that when, you know, they give counsel to married couples, what went on was kind of like if the husband, if that was going on, then you guys would be separated until he was quote unquote healed from this behavior, you know. So to reach out to your community and for this to be, I don't want to say ignored because it wasn't ignored, but you know, it's like you're dealing with people's real lives here, you know. And I think that we lack in empathy and compassion because as a society we are taught to like bury our feelings and like not deal with them. So when it comes to other people and understanding them and helping them, we, you know, we bury the feelings, and it's not cool. It's not cool. But thank you for sharing that. I know that it's kind of hard to revisit these places, so I really appreciate you going here with us. Okay. So now we have a son. Girl, we are breathing a little bit easier because he is in the back. So now we have our son. We've done a court thing. So tell me what's going on now.
So I was able to leave the state of California and I moved to Colorado. I moved in with my mother at 30 years old or 29 or whatever it was. I moved in with my mother and I licked my wounds and I began trying to search for answers to what happened, and still was involved with church, different church. You know, I had tried being involved with that same organization when I was out there, but it just wasn't working. And I still was, you know, I still consider myself a Christian to this day. However, I am not a judgmental Christian. I am not you know, there's a lot of things that I don't like about the way I see Christianity played out in this world. And I try and make it very clear. There's them and there's me, you know what I mean? But anyways, so, you know, I began healing. And
How did you do that? Because that's very important. That's a lot of trauma that went on. So how do we even start to heal?
well, I think the very first thing that you need to do is to decide that you want to heal. And it took a while, you know what I mean? Like, I wanted to heal and I began seeking it. First thing I did was at the church I was at, they had this thing called Stephen's Ministry where a person comes alongside and kind of is like a counselor to you. Not so much a counselor as like a listener. And I began to do that. I just began to, you know, I went back to school. I just began working. I began just doing things, and I wasn't dating at all. I just was doing things to get my life back on track and take care of my son and just keep my focus where it needed to be.
What your focus was on yourself. So
I mean,
would you say that there was some kind of self-awareness going on there?
um, yes, but it was in layers. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to ever put out like this is some kind of fast thing or that it's like you can have a eureka moment, but what I found is that with multiple eureka moments, this clarity came, then that clarity came, then that clarity came. You know what I mean? It wasn't like one big, oh, now I got it and I'm good. You know what I mean? It was continuous growth and steps on the right path. I went on a mission trip with my church down to Oaxaca, Mexico, and it was an amazing trip where we had dental things that we were giving dental help to people. We flew into Mexico City, flew another hour into Oaxaca, and then we drove 3.5 hours into the jungle, and for a week, we were out there working amongst the people and stuff and everything. And on the bus ride back to the airport, I was just praying and reading my Bible and just doing different things. And I had an epiphany. And I really credit this one for a lot of my growth, because I, it came to me that I had to have compassion for him, and I had to fully forgive him. And even more so than that, I needed to take responsibility for me. I needed to take ownership in what I had contributed in putting myself in that relationship, and take a level of ownership, and look at what decisions did I make that I could have made differently that would have changed the entire experience. And that started me on some serious growth that was so necessary. And I think a lot of people need to experience that level of growth, because for me, taking responsibility for why I was there and owning why the decisions that I had made allowed me to then own the decisions to make the changes that would lead to my growth and my ability to truly close that chapter of my life. A lot of people don't want to do that because it can be painful to go, you decided to be involved with this man. You decided to, continue in this relationship when you saw that it was not right. I was showing you, and I say I as in God, spirit, whatever, was showing you the things back then of where that was going to head and where that was going to lead to you, because I had visions of it, but I squelched it down. I didn't want to listen to that. I think most of us, we have this deep intuition. We have this spirit in us. And I might have a stronger spirit at times than other people, because I can see certain things. And so I had seen where this was going to lead, but I didn't listen. And I think all of us have the ability to listen. So making the choices I made led to where it was. But at the same time, I realized as I was taking that I also had the power to make the right choices. And that's what I began doing. And I'm going to fast forward, when I began to do that, then I began to attract people who had my best interests in mind for me. And I met this person that I really I didn't feel like I wanted to be in a relationship with. We were friends, but he really liked me. And he began to really give me a lot of positive attention. And so we dated, and he ultimately wasn't the one, but he was the one to show me this is the way a good person who wants to be in your life can treat you. And I believe he was laying the foundation so that then when I met my husband, I was able to be like, okay, I know that wasn't quite what I wanted, but I know that parts of what he was doing and that kindness is out there. So when my husband began to show me that and we began to talk, I came at it with a very critical eye, and I began looking for things. I began thinking about stuff I had seen before. I began looking at this new person and looking around at the things he was telling me. Did they match up with the things that I was seeing? I got very, very critical, because I think so often we don't want to overjudge. We're taught, don't judge somebody. We're taught to almost act like if we question too much, we're unfairly judging somebody and we're not giving them the chance that we would want given to us, kind of thing, and that's not correct. We need to judge what's going on around us, not in the sense that you want to be necessarily unfair, but if stuff is not adding up, it's not adding up. So don't do it. And in the past, that's what I had done. And things weren't adding up with my
Well, it
husband.
sounds like what you're saying, and I mean, this is just what it sounds like to me, being an outsider. It doesn't sound like you're judging. It sounds like you're just curious. Like if something's not adding up, let's figure out why it's not adding up.
Right. And sometimes you don't even need to figure out why it's not adding up. You just need to be like, okay, you're telling me this, but I'm seeing this. It don't add up. So you're clearly not telling me the truth.
Bam.
Telling me the truth. Why am I here? And we have to, as women, begin to say, why am I here if you're not telling me the truth? Why am I here if you're not making me feel good? Why am I here if you're not helping me? Why am I here? Because the reality is, most women, we will help and we will tell the truth and we will do all these things. So if we're not getting the same exact thing back, why am I here? And that is related to our self-worth and our value. And what I came to realize too was that so many of the things I had gone through in my growing up, even though it made me a very strong and independent person, and I had people tell me I would never have seen you getting involved in a abusive relationship because you were so strong. Yes, I was strong, but underneath it, it was a strong that was covering a hurt person. And that's why I was able to be where I was at. So, with this newfound thing where I began to take responsibility for my choices, which gave me power, and then I began to ask and the right questions and demand equal treatment, I was able to meet my current husband, who is my life partner, who is my best friend, who is everything that I could ever want in a husband. You know what I mean? And he's why I'm able to do everything that I'm doing now. And he's able to let me shine, and he's happy to let me shine. And I'm also able to let him shine. You know what I mean? And it's a true partnership. But it took that awareness on that bus and that continued growth to even get to this place. And it took time. So my husband and I got married 5 years after I left and left California. You know, it took 5 years of growth. It wasn't overnight, but it led to something wonderful. We've been married nearly 13 years now. And, or no, I guess nearly 12 years. I'm sorry. We've been together for 13 years. We were Let me not get ahead of each other, of myself, but you know what I mean? Like, I had to go through that because had I not, I would have repeated the same mistake. And that was absolutely not something that I was willing to do again. I said, no. And I'm thankful that I saw enough to be like, you know, and so I've been really, really, really blessed. And my life has seen a complete, I mean, absolute complete. If anybody knows me and my husband has been around me and my husband, you would never think of anything even remotely like that. And if you didn't know my story, you would never expect my story because we have that type of marriage and relationship that is of the ages. You know what I mean? But it took my experience there to get to this experience here and to appreciate what I have, you know?
Okay. So, with all this beautifulness, one thing that you said was very, 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 very important, and it's a huge problem amongst us, is forgiveness. Okay. And so I would like for you to take me through that journey. How were you able to forgive? What does that process even look like when you were going through that?
In stages. But I think the first thing in for learning how to forgive is understanding that people can only do what they can do. I wanted something out of that my first husband that he could not do. And we have to sometimes just realize like that person can't do it. Whatever it happens to be. You know, same person, same, you know, I think that level of being like, okay, that's the first step towards being able to forgive somebody. And then letting go. I don't, and it's strange because I don't even know how it happened. For me, it took a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of just like, okay, I'm here doing these good things in my life, you know what I mean, and making these positive strides. Do I want to keep my foot back there too? And I didn't want to do that anymore. And the only way that you can fully move beyond back there is to get completely out of it. And that is through that forgiveness, and release, because forgiveness equals release. Doesn't mean I think what he did was okay, but it was release. And when I released that past, I was able to start moving toward the future that I currently hold. And I'm blessed now. Let me tell you.
Yes, girl. No, but I just want people to hear that, because we have a lot of problems with forgiveness, especially with women that have been in abusive relationships or what they consider fucked up relationships. You have a hard time moving on. You're hurt. So you want that person to hurt as much as you were hurt, and you have a hard time forgiving. And I love what you said about the release, because it's not even about them. It's the fact that you're holding on to all that bitterness. So that's a hindrance to self, and you're not able to move on. It's like I said, when you go out and you get some new furniture, you love your new furniture, right? You don't freaking keep your old furniture with your new furniture. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to dump out that old furniture and let this, and so you are able to receive the beautiful sensation of this new furniture, which you wouldn't enjoy if you still had your old furniture sitting in the living room.
Exactly.
So thank you for going there. So now tell us about how wonderful Eric is, because he's wonderful. So you guys have a couple of more babies, right?
So we I now have 4 sons. My eldest son is going to school down in Texas, and he is about to finish up his associate's degree in mathematics, and he had interviewed with NASA, and he actually not too long ago changed his name legally to Taylor. He
Congratulations, friend. I didn't know that. Congratulations.
raised him, and Eric was his father. We never changed the name before, just because to find his father and to open up that can of worms was not worth. And I'll be perfectly frank, I was afraid. I didn't want to stir that. I didn't want to poke that bear, and so I left it there. But when Elijah was old enough, he legally changed his name, and it was of his own free will and doing, you know what I mean? Because he knows who his father, that's the thing, people can, anybody can make a baby, it's just a sperm, you know what I mean? But Eric is his father, who raised him, who instilled values in him, who has made him the amazing, responsible young man that he is. You know what I mean? So we have 4 sons all together. We had, so Elijah is 20. Well, he'll be 20. No, I'm sorry. He is 20 now. Duh. He turns 21 in September. And then we have William, who just made 11. And then we have Jackson and Mateus, who are our 6-year-old twins. So we have a total of 4 boys. And my goal is to raise men who are as equally impressive as their father, who embody strength and conviction, along with a gentleness and sensitivity, to where they can, be the quote unquote man, but also be sensitive enough to listen to and support and love and to express all of those things. So I have been absolutely blessed. We have a great marriage. We really, really do. And the biggest thing we have is, well, there's a lot of big things, but we have communication. We have honesty. We have support. We have a lot of laughter. We laugh, God, we laugh all day, every day. Even in hard times, we laugh. And honestly, if you can't be best friends and laugh with somebody, there's no point in even trying to build a life with them.
None. All right. So tell us about what you're doing now, because you got some beautiful things going on, honey. You a boss. Tell us what's going on.
So you mentioned in the beginning, I'm a business owner, so I'm building a body care line that is completely botanical. Oh my gosh, I've got, wait, do I dare even turn it around? There you can see some of my product, all that product there on the thing. That was for a particular order for a doctor that is going over out, going across the country so that he can sell my products. I've got a Quench Naturel. So I've got a healing line that is all botanical and heals. So I've got toothpaste, deodorant, a healing balm that is amazing and takes the place of Neosporin, Bengay, liquid Benadryl, all these things in one plant-based product that actually works. I've got body lotions. I've got all lip scrubs and things. Then I have Q24, which this is one item in that line. This is my firming neck and eye gel that uses lupine oil that we have imported from France. It's an amazing product, but it's a vegan facial line that is all plant-based, limited to no fillers, limited to no preservatives, all these amazing things. So Q24 is the botanical beauty line. Quench Naturel is a natural healing line. Started by myself and my business partner, 2 women. We started on a shoestring budget. We now have over 30 products. We're now getting ready to grow and get investment and just, take this to a different level. But the whole purpose is to bring health to people in a very authentic and real way. My products are freaking awesome. I can say that because I've been selling a lot of it and I keep up with my clients and they keep coming back, which has been beautiful. I want to thank everybody because I had some amazing customers. I was so afraid because basically I was selling almost 90% of what I was selling was always face to face because people would buy my products, talk to me, learn about it. They have almost all transitioned online through COVID. So I'm so thankful that they decided to come with me and keep me alive through COVID. I'm so thankful, so thankful. And that has been a beautiful thing. And I think even now with people thinking about my skin absorbs anything that I put on it in 26 seconds, it is into my bloodstream. Do I want chemicals in my bloodstream or do I want botanicals and plants? We're starting to question, like, why am I using these things that are full of all these things that really are not good for me? Why is it that the United States has only banned 11 ingredients and 1,328 are banned around the world? So I'm all into that full world. And I've done that and that's wonderful. And to be honest with you, I've been able to do that because I have an amazing husband. And I have an amazing husband because I was able to change and leave all that old crap behind. So that's been wonderful. I love my boys. I have a beautiful family. I am so thankful for. And Eric, he's an astrologer and life coach, and he uses astrology for medical purposes, for emotional. He does also. We just have a really good thing going, and just blessed. You know what I mean? Just blessed. So thankful. So.
And too, you guys, she also has Quench Naturel on the One TV. That's WUN TV. And actually, Allana, honey, gives a lot of information about how she started her business. Her business partner also has shows where they've collaborated on there together. And honey, she gives a lot of information for free 99, okay, about how she started her business and tested it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But on that, I'm getting ready to start back up because I have been in a super intense incubator program. And that was to get me set to where I could begin pitching and getting investment for my company. So I'm getting ready to get back on the one, give people, because I believe that what I've been through to build this business and to build it on no money is something that other people might want to be able to learn from. How can they do it? I'm open to taking questions. So if you want to reach out and ask me a question, I'll answer you directly. I may end up doing a whole show based on it. I'm getting ready to partner with the Salvation Army to work with them with some job training things and use our ambassador program to teach people skills so that they can get back into the workforce and actually have a real money-making ability using our products. I'm about to partner with Salads and Go, which is a local fast food restaurant that creates salads, and it's all over the state of Arizona. But I'm partnering with them to go into their domestic violence shelters and give women spa days, which that's really super personal to me because I've always wanted to give back to women going through what I have been through. So there's just a lot of really wonderful ways to, I'm being blessed, but also trying to be a blessing to other people, and hopefully, be able to keep that momentum going of positivity, because people sometimes think that if I give too much, I'm taking away from myself. No, you give too much, you're actually gaining, because we receive what we give,
Yes, ma'am. What you put out, you get back, honey. So we putting it out there. So I want to thank you so much, Allana. Girl, you are the bomb.com, okay? I want to thank you so much for coming on to the You Thrive Everyday show, okay? And taking us through some of your darkest moments and showing us how you have thrived.
But thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, here comes my wonderful husband. You want to see him real quick? Come here, baby. Come here, because I was just telling him how much I love you. Oh, here.
Second degree.
Come on.
We're waiting for the rest of the charges, but second degree.
Okay,
yes.
Let's not talk about that.
All right, I'm here.
Hello, Eric. You're on the You Thrive Everyday show. We are wrapping up the
You Thrive, and I love April. Happy birthday, Gemini season. Whoop, whoop. God bless. God bless. Listen, hit me up, tailored2youcoaching.com. You want to get a birth chart done and see what's going on and learn about your life in a holistic, spiritual way. That's the way to go.
But,
astrology, numerology, and Quench Natural. This woman and our love story. Did she tell you our love story?
Oh, well, you didn't even get into that. That's a whole other thing.
We met on Match.com, and it was beautiful. God. It was the holy setup. Okay.
I hit the wrong button and I found his profile, and then he sent me an email and he said, I saw you stop by, but you didn't say anything. How come? And I was like, this arrogant person. I don't want anybody arrogant in my life. Well, I closed up my computer and Spirit said to me, call that person. I called him. We spoke for 4 hours that first night. And then we spoke for 3 hours. And then I was
going to work that morning, like with 2 hours of sleep on a train, going into the Bronx, like,
and I was in Colorado and he was in New York. So he brought me back to New York because that's obviously where I was originally from. And it was funny because I always knew in my heart that like that New York accent was going to be something strong in my life.
She knew the flavor.
And and so I heard his voice for the first time and I was like, oh damn.
April, she couldn't resist the bass, April.
And then thank you for coming through, Eric. And
I love your show. Keep up the good work. The world needs you, April.
Thank you, Love Bug. So again, you guys, although she has taken a little break because she, her schedule is booked, honey. She's booked. She's coming back to the One TV.
The goal is to be back in the middle of June.
Yeah, in the meantime, though, you guys catch up on her show, Quench Natural. Like I said, she gives away valuable information. I mean, how to start your business from ground zero with no smoney's, okay? And you got to test products, okay? You got to make sure allergic reactions. I mean, it's a different playing field when you're dealing with products and servicing the community. So I want you guys to go check her out on the One TV, Quench Natural. Go to her website. Check out all her fabulous products, honey. They're fabulous.
So it's Quench Natural EL. We spell natural, quench the normal way, and natural is EL. That's the French version.com so that you guys can find it. And then if you think that Eric and I, if you're interested in anything family related, we have another show that we're bringing back called Tailored Together, which is all about family and relationships and how to communicate and just stuff like that too. So thank you, Miss April.
Thank you, Love Bug. So we're going to wrap it up. I really want to thank all you guys for coming out and checking us out today on the You Thrive Everyday show. We want to thank, of course, all of our guests for being so open and interpersonal with us. And I want to thank you guys for not being judgmental, for reciprocating this information, and hopefully what you're learning, you will pass it on, because our mission is to give a plethora of information to the masses so that we can all strive and thrive, right? We're going to expand human consciousness, baby. Okay, that's how we taking over the world. Okay, with all love and positivity. So thank you guys again. Happy Tuesday. We'll be here first and third Tuesdays of the month. You guys are loved. Thank you very much. Peace out, y'all.
Thank you.